Wisconsin has 165 fish. It actually has more fish than the states of Washington, Oregon, California, Arizona, Nevada, and probably New Mexico combined. Now, that 165 encompasses all sorts of interesting creatures. Obviously, it includes the walleye, the muskie, the bluegill, all these species you're familiar with. But it also includes a lot of really unusual things. I have this model here, but this is what a paddlefish looks like. So it truly has a paddle for a snout. Recently, people started to realize that, in fact, what this is an electroreceptor organ. Every living organism produces a minute electric field. I'm producing an electric field, you're producing an electric field. The tiniest organisms produce electric fields as they move. And in fact, most of these fields are almost undetectable without the most sophisticated and sensitive sensory equipment. But it turns out that this snout is lined completely with very sensitive electroreceptor tissue, and that paddlefish can detect the electric field produced by a microscopic zooplankton swimming in the water. So, and this is in the order of picovolts, so billionths of a volt. And so probably all of you have seen a bluegill. Many of you caught them and ate them. They're delicious to eat. They're wonderful to fish for. They're extremely common. They're found all over the state. There's lots of them out here in Minocqua Lake. In the spring, bluegills make beds of nests in shallow areas of lakes. People call them the beds. And a whole series of bluegill make these little nests, and the males will defend them. And then the females will come in and spawn, and then the males will defend the eggs and defend the fry after they hatch. But as people have studied this species, they found that it's far more complicated than that. In fact, there are two other types of male, what you might call types of male bluegills. The first kind are the kind that are called the sneaker bluegills, the sneaker males. And what the sneakers do is they hang around the edge of these nests, and they wait until the male is in the midst of spawning with a female, and then sneak in and sort of slip in right under when they think no one's looking. They fertilize a few eggs and then get out of there, because the big parental male is pissed at this point because he knows what's happened. But then there's a third form, and this one is called a satellite form. And this form looks like this, and so it looks identical to a female. So this is what a female bluegill looks like. It doesn't have the yellowish or orangish breast area. It's not as big, not as darkly marked. But in this case, basically what the male does is it essentially imitates a female. And it gets a little bit bigger than those sneaker males, which might be 4 inches long. Now this is about 5 or 6. Looks just like a female. The big parental male's in there guarding the nest. It has one true female come in, and then right behind it is what this male thinks is a second female. So hey, it's my lucky day, I've got two. But in fact, it's another male. And then as the male begins to spawn with the true female, it all of a sudden then ejects some milk and tries to fertilize some eggs. Anyway, that's something bizarre about a well-known fish. Then we have the bizarre fish like the paddlefish, which is bizarre in its own right. And they're just 2 of 165 species we have. And there are lots of other interesting stories. So I'll be happy to answer questions about any and all fishy stuff.
What is the reason that muskie have so many different scale patterns? Some are solid, some are striped.
I just think that a muskie pattern is a camouflage pattern. It's going to blend into its background because a muskie is an ambush predator. It wants to sit somewhere, be kind of invisible until its prey goes by, and then zoom out and grab it. And so I think a lot of the pattern variability is just this idea that there are loads of different camo patterns out there.
Can you speak to the PCBs or metals in fish tissues?
Yeah, so you're talking about the contaminants. For instance, they have advisories about eating and things. what happens with a lot of contaminants, particularly PCBs and as well as mercury, is a small amount, there might be a small amount in the environment, and that gets into some of the aquatic insects in a small amount. And then those aquatic insects are eaten by a little minnow. And with things like PCBs and with things like mercury, which are the two things of concern, each time sort of it moves up the food chain, it kind of gets concentrated. So this little minnow, there's 10 bugs out there, each with a tiny amount of mercury, for example, or PCBs. And then this minnow comes along and eats those 10 bugs. Well, now it has 10 times as much as each individual. And then that walleye comes along and eats 10 minnows, and so it has 10 times as much as the minnows do. And it's what's called biomagnification. And so even though there might not be a lot of, if you look at the absolute concentration of PCBs in the water or the sediment, it might not be that high. It gets concentrated by the food web so that it ends up in those top predators. We concentrate it ourselves, so we eat 10 walleyes and we get 10